Yo, what's up? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to the Let's Dive In series. This time we're doing a Let's Dive In on Kratom. I chose to do this substance next to over a year ago, and to be honest, at the time of making this, I'm not even completely done with all of the trials. I've just been having to handle a lot of my personal life, and I haven't had the time to finish it all up. I believe I have one or two left, so I am at the tail end of it. But this isn't necessarily relevant for this episode. Or this part, I should say. I've been thinking of trying to break this down into more of a mini-series for each substance, which a big reason for this is because I don't want the episodes to be so spaced out. This is one series I enjoy making a ton, and I think it's one of the coolest in-depth series we have. But thing is, over the course of this channel, there's only been 4 episodes? So let me explain to you what this series is and how Let's Dive In works on this channel. You could also call this a review. Typically, it's a mixture of both subjective and objective information and data, a big part of it being in the form of scientific trials almost. To set things up, we present vital objective information about the substance, followed by actual tests with it. These tests include things like how food is, or how my energy levels feel, an exercise test, and so on. I'll explain them more in depth when the time comes. And I will say for this episode, and at this point in time, we have some developments in this series compared to the last episodes, and most of it happened while I was performing some of these trials. I've been trying some different things and implementing a few different strategies and tests, and how we do the test also, which if you look back, you'll definitely see a progression with this, as we did start with Kana and codeine, then did a big one with cannabis. But I feel this one will be a lot more detailed and constructed when it comes to the test. I guess you could say a bit more clear and not so bunched up together, which is another reason I want to turn this into parts. But with that out of the way, let's actually get into today's substance, which is good old classic Kratom. I've been very familiar with Kratom for quite a while, and we have a good handful of videos with it. I think a couple of reports, but I also have a story of my first time trying Kratom, and also a mini-series of how Kratom is with cannabis, which will be returning soon. So make sure to go check these out if you want to hear more about my experience with Kratom or how Kratom is in general. And we got a lot of information to cover here before we actually get into the trials, and then we'll get into my subjective experience here with all these different strains at different doses. So I'm sure you'll enjoy this. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. What is it? Alright, so starting with probably the most basic common question you may hear about a substance is this. What exactly is it? What is Kratom? Where does it come from? What does it do? And I'm going to try and give you guys an answer in a straightforward, simple way. But Kratom is a somewhat known substance these days, I'd say, being a very common product to find at head shops and even at gas stations possibly, depending where you are. But it isn't necessarily what I would call a drug, in a similar way that some people would say cannabis isn't a drug, but it's a plant. Kratom, or Mitragyna speciosa, is a plant that's native to Southeast Asia, coming from places like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on. And we can see that in these places, there is historical usage with it, notably chewing the leaves. Chewing leaves will provide typically mild effects, so different powders, pools, and extracts were made. Most commonly these days, you'll see it sold in powder form. With Kratom, it's interesting though, because we can see effects can vary strongly by dosage, also by strains at times. But it can provide light stimulating effects, somewhat comparable to that of coffee, but then it can also provide opioid-like effects, which I'd say is somewhat comparable to lean. Notably, the effects of pain relief and mood boosting stick out for people, though recreational and other medicinal uses are possible. Though I'd say the biggest comes with the potential of it being cut or in a risky combination. There needs to be more research done on Kratom to really clarify, but it's why a community of users do claim that good Kratom is relatively healthy and safe when done right. At one time I said it has the potential to be a miracle drug, which for some people it is, but I'm not sure yet if it is in the same way, say something like cannabis is. There's just too many alkaloids within it that need to be studied yet, as there is a good mix of pharmacological activity going on with it, which opioid receptors are impacted and addiction can be real. But even now as I write this, I'm having Kratom right now and have been regularly taking it for years now. For some, it can be an incredible tool. Now, like with the cannabis trials, we had different strains and different strain groups. And the same applies here for the world of Kratom as well. Most commonly, there's 4 main different strain colors, and that's reds, whites, greens, and yellows. Reds are known to be more body high-ish, more relaxing, and sedating. Whites tend to be on the more stimulating side of things. It can often wake you up and get you feeling focused, which can be great for work. Then with greens, I often feel like it's a blend between those two, and is more of your standard Kratom feeling. And the effects can really depend more so on dosage. It can provide that wakefulness and focus, but probably a bit more toned down and chilled out. Then with yellow, which is a lot less common than the others, it tends to be paired up with how greens can be, though it claims that it's a bit more stimulating. But sometimes, the dosage really determines how your Kratom experience will go. Dose. Okay, so dosage is pretty crucial when it comes to Kratom for determining what kind of experience you want with it. Like I said before, it could just be simply chewing on the leaves that provides the desired effect for many, as many do seem to use it like some use coffee or caffeine. But not everyone will have access to fresh leaves, so most of the time dosage is determined by grams. But this can be another thing to consider also, and that's the quality of your Kratom. Some brands and pools are just going to be more potent than others, so an exact dose of Kratom can be hard to pinpoint at times, as it isn't regulated, but there are some general dosage guidelines out there. Then again, these can vary. In my experience, I'd say, in general, a lower dose is anywhere from 1 to 3 grams. A medium dose will be around 3 to 5 grams, and a strong dose will be like 6 grams plus. But if it's a strong strain, the doses for that could be 1 or 2 grams lower, or vice versa if it's low quality. But for these trials, I got some Kratom from a brand that I'm familiar with. They provide the exact amount of alkaloid content and provide extensive testing on their products, so I knew what I was getting into without having to deal with that random variance in quality. The doses I chose for the trials were 2.5 grams at a light dose, 5 grams for a common, and 8 grams for the strong. I say these are a bit stronger than they should have been, at least concerning the medium and the strong dose. I think a 0.5 lower would have suited them better, but we'll talk about that later. Duration. Now the duration for Kratom all around I would say can be pretty standard. You may feel effects as quick as 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the dose and the potency, but for the most part you can expect effects to fully set in just under an hour. The peak will be around a couple hours tops, with a few hours after of residual effects. The entire experience, or the time that you'll probably notice an effect, is about 5 or 6 hours at most. The dose and potency may cause some varying lengths, but in my experience and what many others report, the time lengths tend to stay fairly consistent. Drug test. Kratom could potentially be risky for drug test, but it's very unlikely that Kratom will cause a false positive. Reason being is, there's nothing in Kratom that would cause it. There would have to be some interaction with something else, or most likely it would just be a fluke. A lab test on the other hand will be able to pick out the contents of Kratom, as it could come up in blood or urine. Or there are tests out there that do specifically test for Kratom, or it could come up as a false positive in some more obscure test. For example, one study showed it could cause a false positive for methadone, but most standard drug tests you won't have a problem with Kratom. LD50. Now, the LD50, lethal dose 50, where 50% of mice die, it has been estimated with Kratom, but it is indefinite due to the varying potencies. But this is pretty much near impossible for this to happen. The LD50 is quite high with Kratom. It's been found with the main alkaloid, Mitragyna. To put it simply, it's thought you would need just under 1,000 grams of Kratom to hit the LD50. Yeah, 1,000. And that's only the LD50. Not everyone is even dying at that point. But it's impossible for the most part because no one is ingesting that much Kratom. Most people are going to have stomach issues once they hit the double digits. even something like 15 or 20 grams would be a heroic dose for most people, unless you have a tolerance. But you'll throw it up way before you'll hit this mark. Really, the concern comes with combinations. Combos. Now, Kratom for the most part has a pretty green profile as far as safety goes for casual usage. You'll mainly see the fatalities involving Kratom will be in a combination with a much harder substance. From this, it is thought that Kratom can influence one into a dangerous state further. For the most part though, dangerous situations came from ridiculous combos, Kratom batches that have been adulterated, and within already at-risk individuals. There have been yet to be any reports of death from just pure Kratom usage alone. There have been suicide attempts with it, but none succeeded with Kratom alone. The main risk is other depressants that may influence respiratory depression or lost consciousness. But stimulants too can be problematic, particularly when Kratom is acting stimulating, raised blood pressure, and other discomforting side effects can arise. Or there may be a risk when it comes to dissociatives, as they can lower the tolerance of Kratom, which may lead you to taking more than you might want and ending you up in a dangerous state. Something else that hasn't seen very much attention yet, but could very well be a danger, is to combine it with an MAOI. Not all of Kratom's alkaloids have been fully studied yet, and a dangerous interaction could occur. Besides that, there are some things it can synergize well with, such as cannabis for example. Used for pain relief, focus, relaxation, opiate withdrawal, recreational purposes, appetite suppression, energy, mood, socialization, pre-workout, sleep. Expected effects. Positives: increased empathy, euphoria, ease of physical exercise, anxiety relief, relief of opiate withdrawal symptoms, mood enhancement, motivation enhancement, can be healthy, antioxidant. Negatives: constipation, gastrointestinal problems, apathy, potential opiate withdrawal, addictive potential, hangover, nausea, vomiting, increased perspiration, chills, tolerance building, dizziness, depression, irritability, anxiety, respiratory depression, muscle aches, skin darkening, tachycardia. Either or, stimulation, sedation, pain relief, itchiness, appetite suppression, impacts on sexual performance, slight visual impacts, impacts on thought flow, impacts on dream state, sleepiness, bitter taste, potentially lowers blood pressure. My experience before this. So I've talked about this before in a few videos, but if you don't know, I kinda am a regular user of Kratom. I used it for many purposes and found it useful in many ways for me. I first got into it out of curiosity, which again, check out my story on my first time trying it. At first I would use it recreationally, using upwards of 7, 8, 9, or 10 grams at points, and then in combinations later, which I'll talk about in some future stories. But I stepped away from that eventually and saw its usage as a tool, which I first used it for work for a long period of time, at least like a year or so, until I felt like I needed a break, which when I was using it for work, it would only be like 2 or 3 grams, and I would take it when I had to go in before a shift always. It would make the work easy as ever physically, I can tell you that. I wouldn't say I ever felt an addictive pull to ever take Kratom. I've only ever stopped for tolerance purposes really, and I've been using it for a while now. It's been like 4 or 5 years now, which is pretty crazy to me. But eventually I stopped doing it for work, and I would make a switch to caffeine for a short period. And these days, I don't like to feel the need to have anything really when I go to work. These days, I'd say I use Kratom because I do love it as a tea, and for when moments get slow or dull at points, and I need a slight boost. Typically like later on in the day or slow mornings, but I love tea whenever. I love the taste of Kratom personally. Most people find it gross as ever. I have to say though, it is an acquired taste, because at first I didn't really mess with it, but I do have to say, you gotta like bitter things for this, which I do. And when I use it now, I really don't go over 3 grams normally, unless it's for a special occasion. For the most part, I'm using it as a tool, and enjoy the slight stimulating push and focus it can bring. It can also be good for physical exercise and activities at times. But for these trials and getting ready, I made sure I didn't have any kratom a few days prior, as to avoid significant tolerance. So you can say I was experienced going into this, but prepared in the right way to where I'll notice the potential effects while undergoing these various tests. Alright, so we're going to end things there for today. I was going to have this be longer and include the red strains, but this first section actually was a lot longer than I anticipated, which is pretty crazy because for the next Let's Dive In, I've actually added more sections for this part, so this will even be longer for the next substance. But anyways, we'll have my subjective experiences next, which they are really detailed, and we'll get a good idea of different strains at different doses. But I hope you enjoyed this first part. Let me know your thoughts and any suggestions you may have. I'm excited for this mini series and everything else we got coming up, so stay tuned. But make sure to subscribe, like the video, and check out the socials. But it's been Someone That's Someone, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.